Hello and welcome to another episode of the Opus Well Style podcast. My name is Iván Watanabe. I'm here with some wonderful friends and guests, Mindy Coolidge, Meredith Greenwald. How are you both doing today?
Doing very well. We're very happy to be here.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us. So we were having a conversation the other day just about your organization. In Opus, we are supporting the Autism Speaks 5K here locally, and I'm aware of what you all do at Up and Away, and so I thought it'd be a really interesting conversation to have you on, talk about you both, the work you're doing, and also just sort of how do we support that community in general, and how can we be more inclusive overall. So just again, really excited to have you on, and happy to have just a friendly, low-key conversation.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Absolutely. So why don't you just introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about your background, where you come from, how you started the company, and we'll kind of kick it off from there.
Beautiful.
Okay, you can go ahead first.
Sure. So I'm Meredith Greenwald. I have been in the field for about 25 years. I have my master's in special education. I'm a board certified behavior analyst, both of us are, and we're both licensed behavior analysts in New York and Connecticut.
Yep, I'm Mindy Coolidge, and I am the same credentials as Meredith, master's in special ed, and then went to go get also our degree in applied behavior analysis, licensed in New York and Connecticut, and then we're board certified also. Meredith and I actually met in the city probably about 10 years ago. We worked on a case together with two twin sisters. So we got super lucky being able to see the way another behavior analyst worked in the field, because it is a job where primarily you work by yourself. And then when you do, sometimes you're on a team of other people, so you get to see how you're similar and different. But Meredith and I got to see each other actually practice applied behavior analysis and kind of quickly realized that we were very similar and unique, because we were similar, but we didn't really meet anybody else who was similar to us in the way that we practice. I guess sort of how we practice is we're much more like holistic. We don't just come from the background of ABA, we come from a background of special ed and education. So we really gear ourselves to work toward relationship building with the kiddos. Do you want to add?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, just rewind a little bit, just to give you a little background about what ABA is. So ABA is Applied Behavior Analysis. And so basically what we do is we break down a skill and break it down into its component parts so that it's easier for some of our learners who have a hard time picking up some of these concepts, break it down to those component parts so that they're better able to understand it. So we lay down that foundation. Once those component parts are learned, we put them together, and then they're able to perform, or engage in behaviors that we're looking for. So, for example, a very minimal example, but like putting on socks. Putting on socks can be a pretty arduous task for some of our learners. So what we might do is teach them the different steps. And if you think about it, there's many steps to putting on a sock, right? So you take the sock, you put your fingers on the outside of the sock, you have to open up that opening to make it super wide, then you have to put it on your toes, etc. So, what we would teach them is all of these different steps, reinforcing all these different steps so that eventually they're able to put that sock on all by themselves. So, what Mindy was sort of tapping into when we do perform these, or when, we're working with the kids, we really tap into that social emotional component of our work with them. That relationship that we have with the kids is of utmost importance. So if a kiddo walks into our office, into our session, and they're emotionally dysregulated or sensory dysregulated, we're going to help regulate them. We're going to help ground them. We're going to help them be in a better place, because we know when they're happy and relaxed and engaged, that's when learning can most occur.
Gotcha. And so, what you mentioned, sort of your approach is different than, what you've seen other specialists sort of have, and tell me a little bit about that, and how you both came together, and why you decided to start the organization.
Yeah, so when we met with those two girls, it was a big team of behavior analysts. So the girls had about 40 hours each of therapy. And Meredith and I were a large part of it, but there were also like three other behavior analysts on the team. And I mean, I was new, so I had come in and I immediately was drawn toward Meredith, and I'm like, oh my God, she's so good. She's exactly like I am, but she had all this experience. So I immediately was like, hey, I would love for you to supervise me. So she had just become a behavior analyst. I was in my field work, but I needed a supervisor. So I actually asked her to supervise me, and it was amazing. I loved, all of it. We worked together on teams, and then I became a behavior analyst as well. But kind of the way that we noticed that we were different was the kiddos we were with, like when Meredith and I would come in the house, we're like running to the door, super happy, like, yay, Mindy's here, Meredith's here. Like, they genuinely didn't know they were working. They were really having a fun, good time. And I guess it was something we didn't even know we were doing this at the time, but now there's a kind of like famous behavior analyst named Greg Hanley, who has coined the term HRE. It's happy, relaxed, engaged. So most behavior analysts now know him, know that phrase, and it's something that a lot of progressive, newer BCBAs are moving toward. And what that means, Meredith kind of touched on this, is when a child or any human being is happy, relaxed, and engaged, then you will learn. If that child is afraid of you, or if they're dysregulated, if they, have other things going on at home, if they don't feel safe and happy with you, you really can't learn. Think about when you're nervous and you're going in somewhere. I can't even think, so you can't expect a child with special needs or autism to be able to do that. So what we noticed we always did is we kind of had kids just be happy and at ease, and we saw the progress so much faster than other people who were kind of forcing them to try to learn and using, I guess, in a way, fear-based strategies, which we were like, just ethically, we knew that was something we never wanted to do. I didn't want a child to be afraid of me or think of me as like really stern. So I think that's really how we were different, right?
For sure. And
so are you seeing most of the time when and I know it's sort of maybe blanket statement, but what sets you apart a little bit more is the general ABA approach, or what you've seen with other analysts is more just like I'll call it transactional, trying to make sure that they're doing these particular steps and they're kind of, this is what they need to do to kind of progress forward, but maybe not addressing the sort of emotional need first and then going through the steps to kind of learn how to, improve these skills. Is that
I think
what you're saying?
you're nailing it. Yeah. I think, so just a little background. We, for every kid, it's very individualized. So we have specific programs that we're going to run, and it's going to work on various things like daily living skills, dressing, eating skills, etc. It's going to work on cognitive skills. It's going to work on language communication skills. So we have, some programs that are specific to these kiddos that we're going to work with. So we have an idea of the things that we want to work on when they come into our sessions. But if they're, as you said, having a bad day, if they're feeling dysregulated, we're going to make sure that they're in a happy place, in a calm place. And what I think bonded us on this case that we keep referring to is that the leader of of that case that we were on used fear-based and used sort of the girls that we were working with. They were sort of at a higher level than what she was sort of working on them. She used timers to like have them come back from reinforcement breaks, and it just wasn't it just wasn't natural. And our approach is very natural, and what Mindy had shared, we want the kids to just feel happy and relaxed, and when we enter that room, they're so happy to see us, and so we know that they're going to be able to learn. And if they're not, then we're going to work on that regulation first and foremost, and then get to that list of programs that we might have for them.
To jump on what she's saying, I'm sorry, to also say is that something we really do a lot and we pride ourselves on and tell all of our therapists as well. And what's nice about being private is that we have the time. So we tell all the families, in the beginning, this is not going to look like work. Pairing is something you do in ABA, which just means building a relationship. So if you don't have a relationship and we walk in and tell the kid, start counting, like, hello, no, they're not going to want to do that at all.
Right.
So we need to first make sure they like us. We need to make sure we understand what is driving them, what are their interests, and then we gear our learning or our teaching and their learning to what they're interested in, and then they're motivated to work for us because they honestly enjoy being with us.
Yeah. I mean, it's very basic, right? At its core, it's just trying to establish a relationship first before, trying to do any work. Like somebody's completely distracted, they're having an awful day. Like you could say the most wonderful thing. If they can't receive the information that you're sharing, like it's no good. You might as well like just end this today and keep it moving.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I can imagine, you brought up a good point. I'm imagining the initial progress may be slower than parents might want in the initial stages, right? Because you're still trying to create some rapport. You're still trying to create a relationship, right? And get the kids comfortable. And so, I'm assuming parents kind of like, well, why aren't they doing anything different? We've been to 2-3 sessions. What's going? Yeah. Why are you just playing? But I think, setting that stage, because you are private and have the ability to spend more time in the appropriate time to actually be effective, makes the sessions probably more valuable.
More meaningful.
It does. And, you mentioned too, like, the good part about everyone that we hire, so everyone is a BCBA, has the same credentials as us with minimum a master's degree in ABA or a related field, with minimum of 2 years of experience on their own. So that's a big component, because you can be a BCBA but have never worked in the field. You can get your degree, but it really does make a huge difference. So you will see that the girls who work for us, I say girls because we don't have any male therapists right now. It's primarily women who tend to be in this type of field. So most of the women who work for us, you will see that they kind of know how long it takes to pair. It's an intuition after working this long, where I will meet a child within 10 minutes. Meredith and I are like, yeah, we already know what to work on, and yes, we run assessments and do these things, but you can kind of pick up on that. And also having that experience, they know, oh, this child is going to take a lot more sessions to pair. They're very closed off. It's going to take a lot. Yeah. They're very self-directed. They're very in their own world. And then some children come right in, and within 10 minutes, you can start placing demands, as we would say, like asking them specific questions, and they're ready to go. So it really depends on the child too. And we try to explain that to parents as well, just because some parents will say, if you haven't done any work, what are you doing? And it's a little trickier, and some kids are ready to go right in.
Yeah. And what scenarios are when would a parent reach out to help get this level of support for their kids?
So most of the kiddos that come to us already have a diagnosis of autism. So typically, that can happen between 1.5 to 2 years old. That's typically when kids are diagnosed. So parents will come to us looking for either support at the school. Let's say they're in a preschool or daycare setting, and somebody has sort of said they're needing a little extra support. We can help then. Some parents are open to just having sort of a full-time case where they're just coming to our office, or we're coming to their homes and we're just working with them for the entire day. So it's the parents that will come to us and look for the support, and what's great about Up and Away is that the model that we have is, as Mindy mentioned, all of our therapists are the most highly credentialed and experienced out there, where other models are, BCBA, which is what we are, just sort of supervises. And there's people called RBTs, registered behavior technicians, who tend to not have a lot of experience. And they're the ones that are actually doing the direct work with the kiddos. So, our model just definitely works the most, because, the most credentialed and experienced are actually doing the direct service.
And just to add to that too, a lot of people don't know this, because they'll be like, oh, I'm a behavior tech. And you don't really know, behavior analyst is significantly different. So what she was saying with a behavior tech, don't really have a lot of experience. They can be 18 years old out of college, out of high school. You do not need to have any further education. And that's honestly worrisome for somebody working directly with children who already have a hard time learning, but then have autism is a spectrum, and it is it's a very nuanced disorder. It really is. Every child is so different. You really need to know what to do. I kind of say it's like having a doctor or someone who's just trained in how to do one specific thing, but if anything goes wrong, they're not going to know what to do. And they're human beings. Something's they're not robots. They're not going to just have a trajectory that goes from 0 to 100. They're going to respond different ways, and you need to know how to shape and change your teaching in order to make it work for them, because it's a lot of wasted time if not.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I can imagine, right? And again, the approach has to, ultimately you want this to be effective, right?
Yeah,
you want them to improve, you want them to be able to learn these skills. And so, whatever process you have to kind of take them through, but it needs to work for each individual kid, right?
Absolutely. And again, not saying bad things about RBTs, just we have seen our model to be most effective. It's really hard to have somebody learning on the job, especially with these kiddos, where they're coming hopefully at a younger age, because that is when is the best time is to start doing ABA with them. We don't want somebody that has to, not have that understanding of like what to do in certain situations and rely on their supervisor, who probably won't come out for another 3 weeks to make changes and that sort of stuff. So we have found our model to be that successful because we have the people that can make those changes, make those shifts, understand what needs to be done in order to individualize programming for each and every kiddo that they're working with.
Yeah. That's super important. And if you were to do research on ABA, are there any sort of things that you're seeing out there that either you feel like don't ring true, or maybe it's a misconception or something along the lines of like maybe this applies to other organizations in the space but wouldn't apply to up in a way, and how you kind of run your practice?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's unfortunately a lot of misconceptions about ABA. I think we pride ourselves on being a little bit more, or having a more progressive approach to working with our kiddos. So one misconception that is out there is that, we use bribery to interact with our kids, that we're going to bribe them to do certain things. But when we're working with kiddos, we have a plan. So we have a plan that we want to see this behavior increase. So what we do is, it's not bribery, it's called reinforcement. So basically, reinforcement is providing a consequence right after a behavior that you want to increase the likelihood that we're going to see that behavior happen again.
Sure.
Bribery is sort of like you're in the moment and you're just trying to fix something. So an example that I love to use is like, for example, your child, you want them to get a haircut. You want them to have a successful haircut. So they walk in, they start acting about, blah, blah, blah. They don't want to get in the chair. You're like, no, take this lollipop, go, go, go. Be good, be quiet. Where,
that's bribery.
That's
100% that's bribery. Yeah.
That because they're already acting up.
So you're reinforcing
You
that
really
acting
don't
up
want to
behavior.
do that. You want them to be. You want to be proactive, like she's saying. And
so the proactive approach would be using reinforcement. So you set up the expectations. You say, "Hey, Stan, we're going to go in. You're going to sit in the chair. You're going to, stay with your hands safely. You can tell the barber, hey, I need a break, or, let's count 10 seconds. You sort of come up with a plan. And if you're able to do all that, you can get a lollipop afterwards. So that will increase the likelihood. So when Stan thinks, oh, I'm going to get my haircut again next week, he's going to remember, oh, I acted all this way and then I get a lollipop after. And then it will increase the likelihood that Stan will be able to successfully have haircuts in the future. And then obviously we want to wean off from the lollipops, but that would help reinforce that behavior that we want to see continue.
Right now it feels like I'm going to be giving my kids lollipops until they're like 18 years old.
Right.
A lot of people are like, well, you're giving them something to do a behavior all the time. But I always say this to parents, especially when it's mostly parents who will ask, or let's say other related therapists, who's like, yeah, but you guys always have to give the iPad or a snack or a sticker or a high five. Well, as an adult who is neurotypical, I learn in a typical way. I don't have any behavior disorder, whatever. Would I work if I wasn't being paid? No.
Right.
No. So even though it'd be a beautiful thing if I could just do that because intrinsically it feels good, it's not the way that the human mind works. Truly. Behavior goes, this is something we learned in school, behavior goes where reinforcement flows. So it's just a type of thing that they say, and it really makes sense. So if a child, you're reinforcing a behavior, a good behavior, it's going to keep going that way. And guess what? Even if you start yelling at a kid and you think not giving them good attention, it's still attention, and their behavior is going to go that way too. So it's like what you notice, it's almost like a manifestation. It sounds a little funny, but what you notice, what you put out there is what kind of will continue.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the things I was thinking about, leading up to this and trying to figure out, how do we use ABA for raising kids, that aren't neurodiverse, or that are more atypical, and sort of, this is a very good example of how to help reinforce those more positive activities and not bribing and not, which, I'm definitely guilty of every so often, for sure.
Absolutely.
My poor husband, I'd be like, don't do it like that, because it's
I can imagine. Yeah, I can imagine.
He's like a BCBA though now. It's amazing. I'm like, oh my God, if he just came in, because honestly, it is simple once you start doing it, but it is something you need to think of a lot. A good example, because I know you and I have similar age children, right? I have a 4-year-old and now a 3-month-old who I'm not using behavior analysis with, really. Not yet. Right, not yet. Okay, so my older son for sure had been using it forever. It's harder when it's your own child for sure. But I think an example would be you want your child to, interact in a kind way with their sibling. So you want to set up the scenario like Meredith said, especially if you know something is like, oh, this might be a little hard for them, like sharing. So you put a toy between them. The older child gives it to the little one and you make a big deal of it, right? So you're going to, oh my God, that's so nice. And it depends on the child. Your child, this is what's interesting about behavior analysts. So we have to notice the child and know what is reinforcing to them might not be reinforcing to me. Some people love to be called out and like, hey, good job. Some people, that is punishing. They don't like that.
Right.
So you have to really know your own child. My child loves to have me say, oh my God, that's so cute. You're the best brother, So that's reinforcing to him. The more I do that, the more likely he is to continue to engage in that good behavior. So when he does do things that are not the most, they might slap his brother or something, I typically would tend to, especially when you know what the behavior is occurring for, like they're looking at you, they want attention, I would tend to kind of push him to the side a little bit and be like, oh, are you okay, to the brother? So you really don't want to give that attention. This is kind of a little more in depth, but if that's an example of you don't want to give the attention to them, you're kind of like, in terms punishing that behavior, you're decreasing. Future
No,
of that.
again, it's all super helpful because it comes down to getting to know your kids, grandkid, like anybody else. I think about employees. Like you have to understand what motivates them, right? Not everybody's motivated by money. You could throw extra money at somebody. It doesn't make them work any harder. But if you maybe they want a praise or a higher title or they want more time off or whatever actually kind of works for them, I think that, understanding your children makes a lot of sense. And, I talk about like funding private education or public school. It's like, well, not every kid's the same. I needed private school. Thank God I got a scholarship to go to private high school because I would have been a disaster in my public school. And some kids, don't want the structure, don't need the structure, don't do well in structure like that. So they'd be much better off in public school. I think that application of actually trying to get to know our kids and seeing, like you said, being observant, because it doesn't work the same way, but the premise of seeing a good behavior, acknowledging the good behavior, figuring out a way to, I don't know if reward is the right word, but sort of like how do they want to be acknowledged in that good behavior?
Exactly.
Makes a ton of sense.
And just again, to just reiterate, reinforcement in ABA terms specifically for sure is it will increase the likelihood that behavior will occur in the future. And so, if she wants her son to not, hit her other son, then her reinforcing kindness, her reinforcing sharing, being gentle, all the stuff, he's going to be like, oh, wow, mommy's really paying attention to me and really giving me all that love for being so gentle. I'm going to continue to do that because that's really what I was looking for in the first place.
And it's not as simple as that. Obviously, you understand you have a 3-year-old.
Sure.
Not as simple as that. Often it's thousands of
repetition.
Sure.
What it is. But in general, especially let's say neurotypical children, they're reinforced by like things that feel good to them, right? And then children that don't learn in a neurotypical way, often it's the same thing. Sometimes it's a little different. Their reinforcement might be like, hey, you don't make eye contact with me. We have some students who like don't want you to do that with them. That's actually very punishing to them. And we would know that about them and give them like a break. Or, some kids want you to hug them. It's really just getting, like we said, getting to know that specific learner.
Yeah. I think, as we have this conversation and as we support Autism Speaks and I learn more about, autism and I'm learning all this new terminology, could really use some help or some guidance, and I'm sure the listening audience as well, of like how do children with autism, autistic people want to be referred to? How has that sort of evolved? And also, what are the different ways that we can support the parents of these kids as well? Because I just think better understanding helps support an overall community. So I could use some expert, kind of advice on that.
There's a few things. So I think really it's the most important first to ask if the child is very young. Ask the parent, what are you comfortable? How are you comfortable me referring to your child? Most of the time in the past, it was told person first language. So you'd say a person with autism. Now it's coming a little bit more into knowledge that adults that are autistic like to be called an autistic adult. Use the term first because they say you can't remove that from me. That's part of who I am. It's not like I have I have a muscle disorder, right? This actually changes my brain and makes me who I am. So I am an autistic adult. And a lot of people will choose that on their own. I know that there's some people also that say like, no, I don't think that defines me. But I think the vast majority right now is of adults are saying like, it's who I am. I like to say I'm an autistic adult, right? Very proud of it, and rightfully so. I mean, it's like a
That's our
superpower in
identity.
many ways.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so just asking the question of the parent, how would you phrase it? I think wording is extremely important. And so you want to, I try to come off as curious and certainly not judgmental, but sometimes you can ask a question and come off that way, right? So is there a particular way that you would ask the question of a parent on how to refer to their kids or how they would prefer that or
Just being straight and just asking.
Yeah.
You don't,
Saying like, I'm sorry if this
Yes.
comes off wrong.
Right.
I'm not sure how to ask.
Sure.
I would say all families are just so happy that you're asking
Absolutely.
and are saying, oh my God, please don't worry. I don't even know all the terms or
Right.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's super helpful. Again, I learned this phrase recently, sort of default to curiosity and suspend judgment. I really just try to
Wonderful. I
ask
love
these
that a lot.
questions, and sort of, I think being direct, because when you're tiptoeing around it or trying to tap dance around the
Yes.
question, it comes off as like less, more disingenuous. Like,
Yes.
yeah, so
Agreed.
that makes a lot of sense.
something you were just saying too is, okay, so let's say that you're in public and you see that a child is having a hard time, right? And it's maybe clear to you that they have autism or, something along those lines. There's a few things you can do. I would say number one is like, don't stare, obviously. I mean, don't stare, don't give mean looks or like, oh,
Little side
because
comments. Oh, they're so spoiled. Why are they acting like that?
yes. And I mean,
Yeah.
most adults now are not going to do that, hopefully, with any child, because you already know it's as a parent, it's hard enough if your kid's like screaming on a plane, right? But you're still able to like, kids with autism might be having serious dysregulation. This might be terrifying for them. It might be their first time on a plane. They may also just have something have happened. And a lot of children with autism also have like a lot of sensory processing issues. So this might be, think about the pressure on your ears. That's probably 100 times more intense for a child that has that type of issue with inner ear pressure. So I think something you can do is, and this has actually happened with me before, I've done this on a plane, has been like, hey, is there any way I can help? Or like, and especially, I think it's more like, do you think they'd want this book? Like giving an option of something rather than like more questions, because like it's probably overwhelming for the parent.
Sure,
as it is.
sure.
Or like, hey, do you want me to sit with them? Because a lot of those kids, like they might just want like a space in the back of the plane or something along those lines. And I think just that, like smiling at a parent, right, when it's happening, is just letting them know, or like saying you're doing a really good job.
Yeah.
Is huge.
We've obviously worked with so many families over the years, and I had one. I'm thinking of two scenarios in my head. One is a parent who was having a hard time with their kiddo who would take the train. So this kiddo always wanted the same seat in that train when he would travel, and I think sort of helping people understand maybe why that kiddo wants that same seat. And I think that a lot of our kids really love consistency. They love feeling like things are the same and that routine helps them. And especially in this scenario where Mindy had pointed out, there's sounds, there's noises, there's commotion, there's lots of, lots of lights and everything. So them finding this same seat is very helpful to them. And it just can help maybe them find their own way to regulate because things are so crazy. So this is like sort of the norm for them. So in those moments, like if you are on that train and you see that happening, maybe you get up and say, please have my
Yes.
seat. And you definitely keep your comments to yourself about, if you're feeling like, oh, this kid is acting up because they just want my seat, like think that it goes a little deeper. There's always a why to why these things are happening. And then another scenario, which is a little bit more of extreme, is I work with a family where the kiddo, we were in the middle of New York City, and he would walk across the street, and I don't remember why it was a few times that this whatever had set him off, but he lay down on the ground and began engaging in SIBs. So SIBs are self-injurious behavior. So he started banging his head on the street.
Oof.
And this parent would tell me that quite often people would just stare at her and just look at her. But in this moment, what the better way would have, how to handle that is, hey, can I help you? Can I help you get your child to safety? Because this is a very unsafe situation. So
Sure.
here's a
Yeah.
very specific situation where you can help. You can go and say, hey, I will help you walk your child over to the side of the road so that they're in a safer situation, and and just help in that capacity. But
Yeah.
I can't even tell you how many times
Yeah.
this has happened. And she said people have just stared at her.
I think some people, I genuinely believe most people are just like scared. It's
Sure.
something they're not
Sure.
used to.
Sure, absolutely.
They don't know what to do. So I think like as the therapist or parent, like staying super calm in that moment and just trying to say like, this is just really hard for them. Another example, I had a little child. She was only 2. She was a peanut little thing, but man, she was a spitfire. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yes, I do.
She would, in an elevator, in closed spaces, she would just lunge and attack at like grown men, right?
stranger.
And they were scared of her, and I was scared, like, oh my God. So I would try to be very proactive about it, explain it to them, things
Sure.
like that, and just like, tell them ahead of time. I would wear like a note that would say like, everything is okay. I'm her behavior analyst. This is something you
interesting.
can also give that to people. A lot of like, let's say nannies in the city or here don't speak English. So if there was an issue there where people would be like, is this kid safe? So those are things you can do too, is just to have like a pre-written note, like my child has autism. This is hard for them. Like, please be understanding or kind. Those
Yeah.
are some things that parents can do as well, just for a family. And then, like Meredith said, especially like you, okay, you're gonna go out, you're a young man, right? You're able to help. You could say to the mom and be comfortable being like, hey, can I help you like walk your dog across the street while you deal with the child or like your other child? Let me carry your bag, things like that. It would take you a minute and it would be like, it would make their
So helpful.
whole day.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, that's all super helpful. I mean, again, I think just trying to get the information out there, because people in general, I think, honestly want to help, honestly want to do the right thing, honestly want to be able to support in those situations. And part of it is, maybe they're staring because they literally just don't know how to like compute what's going on in their brain, because and so the immediate thing is to like, let me just not do anything because I don't want to make it worse, and I also like have no clue what's going on. So my hope for this conversation is that people will listen, sort of get a little bit more insight as to what's going on, why you should react in a more positive way, and then again, what are the things you can do.
Yes, exactly. I love that.
As we kind of wrap up the conversation, any particular thing that you think we haven't touched on, anything that you wanted to make sure to leave with the listening audience, anything that you really wanted to make sure to kind of say, before we part ways?
Obviously, we are big believers in ABA. It is a evidence-based type of therapy that obviously works with our kiddos that we that we see, but it could be used for anybody and everybody. I use it on my husband, I use it on my children. So it's just a very effective tool. And obviously we did talk about bribery as being one of the misconceptions. There's also it has a misconception of it being sort of we create sort of rote responses, robotic responses, and that we're here just to have people comply, or our kiddos comply with whatever we want, for them to do. But progressive ABA, which is what we do, we're all about empowering the child. We're empowering the communication. So for example, if we say, hey, why don't you leave, if you're playing with your chains, but it's time to come back and do something that's maybe less preferred, we're going to help them advocate for themselves and say, hey, I need a minute, or I want to play some more. So I think it's really important to understand that ABA is all about empowering children and getting them to communicate so that they can advocate for themselves. And we really are big proponents of that.
That's a great point. Like what she's saying is we're really teaching them how to use their own voice and say no, or in their own way, right? Some kiddos use a device. We work on that. Some children use PECS, which is like picture exchange systems. We'll work on that. But really functional communication training is what we focus on a lot. It's proactive, and having the child say to us, no, I don't want to do that.
Right.
That's very appropriate. They should know how to say that. And so we're teaching them all these things in an appropriate way, because that is how they advocate for themselves. And our biggest importance is for them to be as independent as they possibly can be.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for joining. If somebody wanted to find more about Up and Away, either for their families, for their kids, or just learn more about it, or, I know you all are expanding the practice as well and hiring. So where can they find more about you all?
So they can find us, if they want to find us on Instagram, it's upandaway.nyc.com. So our handle is just Up and Away. And then they can also email us anytime. We have a website, which is www.upandawaynyc.com.
And the email address will be on the website,
it's
and
right
I
in
believe
there.
it's also on our Instagram. So
perfect. Yeah, we'll make sure to tag you both on our social posts on the podcast as well when it gets sent out. So listen, thank you so much for the time today. I really appreciate the education and the knowledge, and just being generous with your responses. So appreciate you both.
We appreciate you sharing this message, because it's a really important message to share. So thank you.
Absolutely. And to you, the listening audience, thanks for tuning in. Please click subscribe below to be notified when we release our next podcast. I'll see y'all soon.
Bye. Thank
Thanks.
you.